Welcome back, everybody, to the Eastern Clash from Taipei, Taiwan. I'm Caldo, and with me are Trixler and Dreadnought for our second series of the day after we've just seen MVP Black take down the Deadly Kittens with a 2-0. And Dread, that was not quite the series we expected.
It was not. MVP Black, the amount of confidence that they displayed in the pre-tournament interviews that we had with them was unreal. Even more so than what they displayed at the Spring Global Championship when they were able to go undefeated at a global tournament. So the fact that Deadly Kittens, a non-league region, was able to compete up against them, automatically you got to go. Like, how good is Korea or MVP Black, or was it just too much disrespect?
Tim, what did you take from the series that we just saw?
I agree with you. It was actually very cool to see Deadly Kittens have that type of, first off, leading kills in game number 2, and almost a spot where they could have gotten victories. So that was actually very exciting to see, considering I would probably put them in the bottom 2 of skilled teams here at this region. So I was actually very excited to see that. Now going into our next one, CE versus Tempest, CE is actually gunning for that top 3. A lot of the teams we talk to them here, they're like, we hope to get top 4. But CE, now a team that thinks they're a little bit better than a lot of the teams here, actually has a chance against these Koreans.
They do.
It's going to be actually quite interesting since we have with CE, of course, another problem. Once again, they're not here with a full lineup. One of the players dropping out, but they were at least able to replace him.
I think the biggest positive sign here for CE specifically is the fact that Sanjin was originally a part of the roster in phase number 1, and that they replaced him with KTY. So the fact that KTY is the one not here and is being replaced by Shai out of SOA in the Chinese region, it is a huge tool because at least the core 4 have dealt with this before. That they have dealt with, like, knowing that they feel like maybe the weakest link needs to be replaced and needs to be adjusted. So the fact that KTY is not here, it sucks, but it's probably the best player on their team they could lack to have.
And we're going to take a closer look at them in a second, but of course with this right now we have a really interesting setup for the Chinese team.
准备这次参加中学赛，最近训练量偏少，但是这2天应该会加紧训练，准备好这次比赛。
No, the Tassadar shield keeps him
alive. Oh my god!
我们队上次没能出国打季中赛，确实挺遗憾的。然后所以这次想尽力打好这次比赛。这次目标争取前3吧，尽力。
The replacement of one of their players with Shai is definitely something that they have to adapt to, but of course we were talking about CE. They were really confident going into the tournament. The situation has changed a little bit, but Dread, what do you think can we expect from them with this setup? Do they have a chance of rivaling not only the Korean teams, but of course now also their opponent in the next series?
I do think that Tempest, being the 3rd seed out of the Korean region, is not only are they the weakest obviously with that seeding, but more importantly, the strengths that they have is not necessarily through the macro game and manipulating the map heavily, and that anytime a Chinese team is facing a region that is willing to team fight them directly, they not necessarily have the upper hand, but at least they can feel a little bit more confident into that, and that is the biggest thing for me that makes me optimistic here, even without their full 5-man, that CE has an opportunity to take Tempest.
Yeah, that was actually interesting to me too, because when we talked to CE, they mentioned they think that their macro is their best gameplay plan coming into this tournament. But any Chinese team that you watch, you assume that it's all about team fighting because it's hyper-aggressive compared to any other region. So I agree with you. I expect CE to come in with that hyper-aggression and force those team fights.
And it was also, in that same interview, one of the coolest things was that not necessarily that they felt like they had to focus onto macro play, but they gave us a really cool insight on their perspective on it, that they feel like it almost is not that macro play is the only way to be able to play Heroes of the Storm, but they realize that the team fighting playstyle that we typically see out of the Chinese region can be limited in risk as long as they focus on the map aspect first. And it was really kind of enlightening to see a leading Chinese team come to an international tournament with that kind of perspective.
It was an interesting theme throughout the entire interviews we had with the players, that most teams really agreed that macro was the one thing they wanted to focus on. We had a few teams that said they are hyper-aggressive right now and they're trying to just adapt a little more, show more variety in their play, and that, as you said, the macro play is something that is a lot more forgiving than always looking for the team fight. But of course, it's not only about CE. We have them going up against Team Tempest now. And Tempest they had a lot of fun in those interviews. They seem to be in high spirits coming into this tournament.
Yeah, those guys are very lovable. You know, I feel like immediately when they started talking to us in the interview, everybody was suddenly like, why don't we get to talk to these guys more? Because they are just so open. I mean, Han Kono is a freaking rock star, like a literal rock star, it seems like, in the way that he approaches life. And so, I mean, he kind of stole the hearts of everyone. But I've been impressed with their play as time has gone on. The more that I've looked into Tempest, I feel as though, even though they are the 3rd seed out of Korea, that they are a team to look out for here at the Eastern Clash.
Yeah, for me too. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed in the interview, which made me cheer for them even more on top of all the laughs and giggles we had with them, was how they approached the game. They were very excited to have these different types of play styles that they're willing to put out in front of people because they want to test limits. They want to break limits. They don't want to run Gyeon and Cocktail because everyone says to run that build. They want to run Wisdom Duelist, which you will see this tournament. So I'm excited to see that. Even last right Maltheo, we've seen that in the past against Genji, because they do try out these different types of play styles, these different ways to punish. Sometimes it doesn't work out for them, but I'm excited for it.
It's definitely going to be super interesting to see how Tempest now measures up against China. So we're going to also take a closer look at Tempest to find out how exactly they think about the tournament.
일단은 지금 팀의 분위기는 굉장히 좋고요. 좀 이렇게 즐겁게 하자는 생각으로 이렇게 오늘 이번 이스턴에 참가하게 됐습니다. 중국 팀 중에서 이제 얘기를 하자면 저희가 C랑 맞붙게 되는데 스크림에서 꽤 많이 상대를 해본 팀이에요. 굉장히 잘한다고 생각을 하고 많이 준비를 해야 할 것 같아요. 목표는 우승인데 결승전까지는 꼭 가고 싶습니다.
Tempest is definitely going to be super interesting here, how they're going to be able to perform. And I really got the feeling that when we talked to the teams, MVP Black, we talked about their confidence. They come into this tournament, they want to be victorious. Then we have L5, the solid 2nd spot in the region. But they seem to have a huge problem breaking through and taking MVP Black down. But to be honest, Tempest was really the team that I felt was the most confident that they actually had a shot of maybe beating MVP Black.
That confidence might come from their incompetence, right? Everyone kind of are agreeing and looking towards L5 and MVP Black to have a great tournament. Maybe they come here and they're like, you know what? We're set up. We put in the practice. All we got to do is show up. And it was actually kind of refreshing to see them set up and willing to have that confidence that you mentioned they exuded.
Yeah, and especially when we're looking at the results that Tempest also had in their own region. When they lost against L5 and MVP Black, that was very early on in the season. Since then, of course, a lot of things changed. The roster has definitely grown together. But do you feel that this gives them a bit of an edge and maybe a really good shot at making an appearance here at the tournament?
Absolutely, and this team is, you know, they aren't foreign to synergy. Without, like, they have 2 brothers on the same roster, right? And they've shown the teamwork and coordination that they've been able to have as a roster in the past with Tempest, claiming themselves a world champion at the Summer Global Championship. I think they really do have a great opportunity because though they are the 3rd seed, they have amazing play. I just feel like that their map pressure is a little bit slower than that of L5 and MVP Black, but their team fighting can really go head-to-head to the best in the world. And as long as they clean that up, I think this could be a really great series.
All right, so let's take a closer look at our first map that we have in the series here between the 2 teams. And of course, once again, this is going to be one of those series that at least gives us something to compare what we've just seen from MVP Black. And as we see here, the first ban on the side of the Chinese team, Battlefield of Eternity, moved away, and also Brax's Holdout. Our first map, though, is going to be Dragonshire.
I think Dragonshire is a really good map for Tempest, one that I'm confident they'll be able to play properly. But I feel like China has been a region that has ran Dragonshire maybe more successfully than almost every other part of the world. Their Dragon Knight mid-game play has been innovative and was displayed thoroughly throughout the mid-season brawl. And so I don't think that because I favor Tempest for the series, that's a risk, but it is still a, you know, a confident choice to take that against a team like CE.
Yeah, CE has been wonderful on this battleground as well as Brax's Holdout. Now, with it being banned out, obviously we won't be going there, but this is a team that will move in and force fights. And I'm actually kind of very excited / curious how this is all going to shape out against Tempest, because Tempest is a team, I think you and Gilly were talking about it earlier in the back room, where we see them literally force fights even if they don't have an advantage. They want to fight. And CE's going to be having a smile on their face. Okay, let's brawl.
Now, the interesting part to me is really that with CE now trying at least to focus heavily on map control, this is a good map for it. They were talking about picking the Haka, trying to use globals as their strength and play around an opponent. So the situation that you just talked, the dynamic of well, Tempest trying to force fights, but on the other hand, CE is always attempting to get an advantage first, is definitely going to come into play on a map like Dragonshire, where you need to have a lot of control.
I completely agree. The one thing I am concerned about when looking at CE and Dragonshire, traditionally they do seem to highly prioritize 2-1-2s to almost a fault. They are not the only team. I feel like China as a whole is willing to, even if they have a superior 1-1-3 style composition, they will not gain as much levels 1 through 9 as they possibly could.
Stitches already banned out. After the last series, we had a pretty big impact for the Deadly Kittens when they were going up against MVP Black here. But CE already taking care of this problem. And we have Tempest eliminating Genji.
6 out of the 8 teams that are here at this tournament, when we asked them who the best warriors were, they mentioned Stitches was the #1 warrior for this tournament. So we will see a lot of picks and a lot of bans for that Stitches afterwards. It was a new Barak, some Murdens were mentioned here and there, but the constant was that Stitches. Now, it's all about that first pick. Will we be seeing that Dahaka? Typically, you won't see it from the Koreans. They mentioned they actually enjoy Illidan more and think Illidan is a better form of what Dahaka brings to the field, but for the Chinese team, definitely.
Especially when we're talking to MVP Black, Rich immediately said that he doesn't really understand why Dahaka still has this massive of a priority in the Western scene and that Illidan is taking over that slot for the Eastern scene at least. But the first thing that happens, we have Oriel starting into the game.
I think that's awesome for CE to be able to pick that up here. The immediate Uther Greymane on the side. Tempest, right now everybody's keeping it to the standard, but I like that for CE because it does leave the opportunity to abuse the fact that they can synergize that with some form of a battery, and the Eastern meta over phase #2 of HGC has been cycling around the hero of Oriel, and so the fact that she already made it through and is locked in here, it doesn't scream like, you know, they have a huge advantage, but I think it gives them a slight edge.
Yeah, definitely coming in here with the Drassen being set up, and we always know the hyper carry follow-up will be that follow, will be the Lunara. Typically, as of late, for a lot of teams, we're starting to see that stretch a little bit more towards that Lunara. That level 7 talent, Splintered Spear, has been a very big nuisance for heroes like Uther, who only have those solo burst heals. In fact, Uther so much has had that pressure against Lunara that a lot of our Chinese teams mentioned they don't even like running Uther anymore. They feel like he's at too much of a disadvantage, which is crazy to think about considering the priority that we see from him.
Also, as you're mentioning Lunara, there's so many cool differences that we have between the Eastern and the Western scene. Lunara mentioned by a few teams, as for example L5, which don't even recognize how strong she can be, since they say the lack of a mobility tool like Vala's Vault, for example, just puts so much of pressure on her that it's not worth picking her. So the difference in the attitude from team to team here in the Eastern scene is actually extremely interesting. And CE for now goes straight into that Dahaka that we mentioned earlier. They're trying to control the battleground, but they're already building towards a strong potential four-man with now Tacita and Oriel, so heading into a double support.
So with that Cassia ban, I would like to see more of like an Illidan ban. I automatically go, well, that is going to be the Uther into the Illidan to match into the Dahaka into the top lane, making it a less favorable matchup for CE, and they already have Oriel and Tacita. Their tri-lane, their four-man could be absolutely outstanding, but if they fail onto the top half the map, suddenly they're no longer going to be able to body that mid and bottom lane, be way too concerned about keeping their Dahaka alive. So this hover over the Tyrael, I'm just a bit concerned on whether or not it's going to really help them throughout this game.
Yeah, Tyrael seems to have fallen out in the Western meta pretty heavily. You see him picked up here and there occasionally, but on the Eastern scene, everyone loves Tyrael. They still pick him up, so I can see the reason for this ban and why they're moving into it. You don't want that Greymane dive into the Uther save, having multiple slowdowns, but I agree with you. I don't think Tyrael's the way to go. In fact, they're even thinking about Malthael, so they are thinking about that top lane. While Malthael in a straight-up 1v1 can shut down Dahaka, the Illidan hunt pressure is usually too much to ignore.
This is definitely something that I'm personally interested in now, if Illidan is going to be the pickup. I can understand the thought process behind banning out Malthael, especially when you're worried about your top lane matchup with Dahaka. But now that Cassia is banned, from a Western perspective, it automatically screams Illidan. So in this case, CE hasn't even thought about Illidan here. They were hovering Tyrael, they decided in favor of Malthael, Illidan not even crossing their mind. But with what we said earlier, with especially now that Korean teams prioritizing Illidan a lot higher, this could definitely be a good pick for Tempest.
And we do talk about Illidan being prioritized within the Korean region. Tempest hasn't been as high as some of the other teams, but they aren't a stranger to Illidan. At some point in time, literally any team, especially if you're a world champion in the past, you know how to run the Illidan. You have run the Illidan because he's been so consistent for so long. So I guess I'm trying to say that I don't think it has to be the Illidan here for Tempest, but again, with the way that this draft is developed, I really feel like it would be favorable for them.
Yeah, if I was drafting, I would go into Illidan and a Nubarak to the pickups. Instead, though, it will be the Leaning and a Nubarak here for Tempest. So Greymane, Leaning do set up that burst potential you're normally going to see for the engage, the force fight afterwards, Uther to help clear out the area. So they definitely want to clear out Vala if she were to become the hyper carry, or Lunara, but Tempest, right now, do have pretty solid engage.
One of the interesting things about Tempest is also that they say the Western meta currently is stronger than the Eastern, so that they have to do some work to catch up to it. And not necessarily by just simply copying the meta, but just by further developing it. And they were saying that they are very willing to experiment with a few new heroes that they think have a good position.
So our hyper carry will be coming in. Drev, what are you thinking? I'm thinking the Lunara right away.
Yeah, I feel like Lunara is absolute standout here for CE. Especially anytime you take the double support. If you have just the Ariel, I like the argument going into a Vala. I don't mind that nearly as much. But if you have double support to ensure that Lunara is not going to be under too much pressure because she doesn't have, outside of using possibly one of her heroics, an escape tool, that I really like that. So CE right now has an absurdly dominant composition. With the amount of wave clear they have, the synergy between the heroes, it can skirmish well. It's just whether or not that top lane is too big of a problem. And again, if the 2-1-2 is going to hinder CE, and if they all in onto that, because this is a prime example of a composition that I love their 1-1-3 and how they can manipulate the map. But again, within the region, it does seem to be less clear as it is for the western half of the world. And the Artan is there for H82.
All right. Trim, your moment.
Okay. First off, I'm excited to see the Artanis. Then I look over at the opposing side and I see Muradin and Lunara, both great heroes at shutting down that Artanis. But in the top lane against a Dahaka, while he doesn't have the wave clear, if there can be a solid opening with Artanis versus Dahaka, Artanis can shred through him and put enough damage on him. Problem is, if Dahaka plays patient and dances around the bushes and gets the wave clear, it's going to be a hard matchup. But hey, I'm always excited for pickoffs.
Yeah, it could definitely be a bit rough here. For CE, I would say we have more of one of the most Western drafts that we have seen so far.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it is. And but it's really interesting on like the origin of like where the Ariel double support kind of came from into the first place. It definitely is now absolute meta into the Western world, and it's no surprise to see CE pick it up. I adore their draft. I am very scared for Tempest in this game, even though I consider them heavily favored.
Well, as we're jumping into the game, we have two at the left side. CE now with a pretty solid draft here, double support composition. They are rocking the Oriel, Tazada. We have them for the top lane with Dahaka, Muradin, and then of course also Lunara for that damage.
And in the red side here, it is going to be the third seed out of Korea. It is Tempest. The biggest thing I want to highlight is H82 onto that Artanis. Beyond the fact that it is a bit of a rare pick, I mean, this guy hits swap on swap on swap. In my opinion, he is the best Artanis in the world.
Now, one of the things to consider immediately is, of course, that we have China on the side of C. So that, talking about swaps, that's the first one already. And it is Tazada who gets swapped in, but look at Honkono being in trouble on the Greymane here, barely moving out of the fight.
And you see how Honkono is actually not using the disengage to walk away? This is something Honkono does that I think is going to be a huge punish point throughout this tournament. Another swap landing on the Shy. The knockup is there, now first blood over to Tempest. I'm telling you, H82 is the guy to look out for. He is an absolute monster on Artanis.
We're not even a minute into the game and he already had two solid swaps there, and one of them resulting in an immediate kill against a substitute player on the side of CE, and it just continues with Tazada being blown up by Li Ming.
Beautiful work there for Lockdown to be able to make sure he gets that pick. Now 2 already for Tempest. But we have to remember, Caldor, the biggest thing here is the fact that CE has an amazing amount of wave clear. They can really begin to be able to pressure out this map. It's just whether or not they can recollect themselves, not let this colossal momentum that Tempest has been able to achieve get to them mentally.
Yeah, this is one of the issues that could definitely be a big problem for Tempest here. But I also want to highlight real quickly that when we're talking about builds, once again on Greymane, we're actually seeing this time Wolfheart, whereas in the last game it was the cocktail build that was focused on. But an early Dragonite already snuck in here by Tempest thanks to the early double kills. So extremely well played by the Korean team.
Yeah, and I think that it was Trixler that brought this up into the draft analysis. It was, I mean, this is Honkono's go-to build.
Yeah.
Every single time that he is on the Greymane, he's going to go into what he calls the Dami build all the way back at the Summer Global Championship into the Wizened Duelist, more auto attack focus for the earlier stages of the game. And if you're successful, it can snowball ridiculously. The damage output of Wizened Duelist at maximum stacks is almost unmatched.
The one thing, of course, that you sacrifice is that poke potential that you have with the cocktail build, especially with a good stack on level 7, which you oftentimes see in particular on map like Infernal Shrines. But for now, Tempest is setting themselves ahead with a solid level lead after Lockdown got value on both lanes now, the mid and the top with the Dragonite.
And again, CE, they need to take a minute, catch their breath, recollect themselves. They are doing a good job for now being able to stall things out. The Dragonite in the earlier stages of the game really isn't that impactful. Yeah, it got itself a turret up on mid, a little bit of drain throughout top. And now if they can move together as a unit, I really feel that they can bring the pressure to Tempest and make Tempest at least second guess themselves for a decision, because so far it has been smooth sailing.
Yeah, so far Tempest has been doing really well here. And well, for now, down to the bot lane, a camp moving in. And this is actually really cool for CE. So first of all, they steal the camp away. Hong Kong was the one trying to take it, but CE just didn't get fooled. They moved in, take the camp, and now they have exactly that pressure that we've been talking about with a camp on top of it. So this is a really rough moment for Tempest, and they are going to lose some infrastructure at that bot lane.
But they've got the flank here. They're going to be looking for a nice engage window. He's going to make the rotation down. He did lose quite a bit of experience there up through the mid. Actually, it wasn't actually losing that much because his ammo was drained because of the Dragonite. The tower zone exists, so that's a nice moment for them. Good damage coming out to Shuyu, and it should be enough. Another kill for Tempest, 3-0 so far, but they're looking to bite back there. Sign taking the damage from Lunara, drops a shield, he survives. This is just ridiculous. Tempest calculating everything in this game.
And Tempest trying to re-engage once again. Hong Kong already on the move, and he drops Lunara, easy peasy, trying to see if he can maybe get a kill against Lu Ful on the Oriel. Paradise moving in with the Haka, leaving the top lane alone. They were waiting for an engage of Tempest, but Tempest actually, after the kill against Lunara, moved back. So the Haka just used his global, and now Atanas has free reign at the top lane.
That's a full level lead into, again, a composition that you traditionally would not expect to be this successful on a map like Dragonshire. The camp pressure is going to be out, timed perfectly here with the Dragonite. Tempest is doing everything they need to make sure they don't fall behind in this game. But I still feel as if we see a moment where CE can take a breath. It could be a very different story. It just, you do not want a team like Tempest to snowball this game out of control, especially now that Wiz and Duelist is online.
Once that you have the level 7 and you can start with their stacks on Grey Main, you know that the opponent's in trouble if they don't get these kills. And talking about potential kill there against Wind moving back already, also just mentioning, on level 4, Insatiable taken as the talent for Grey Main, so gets a bit more mana in the fights, helps him with the sustain on the lane as long as he's being healed up by Uther. But another good combo against Shy here. There's at least that swap in that mid lane as Tempest is fighting against the Dragonite that he is trying to grab.
Taka did a good job there of being able to backdoor that top shrine, having to deal with the night camp pressure that we already saw Tempest get out. And that's why I was talking about the timing of those camps. It essentially forced that, even though, yes, the members of CE did get a temporary threat, shoot, you're in a bad spot there. Oh, dimensional shift is going to be up, though. But essentially, it is the pressure outward. It's not even that CE had much threat onto the Dragonite. It was more like a feigned threat to draw rotation up to top. And Tempest is abusing the window that they were able to gain now. And after that transition came from H82 into the top lane, they're closing in on the 10 mark. It's just all about, can CE collect themselves? This is a very common thing within the Chinese region. And so something I'm going to keep a heavy eye out, not just for this series, but throughout the entire tournament.
Tempest is currently putting themselves into a position where an early level 10 might lead into a second Dragonite if they play their cards well. Atanas has already taken over control up at the top, and down here it's now heavy pressure by Tempest as they're trying to go for the throat, already grabbed up with the heroic abilities, the Divine Shield to help out Greymane when he decides to go deep, and they can definitely try and take that Dragonite. The rotation is already starting. Atanas heading into the middle, as is Li Ming.
Artanis is yet to pick up his heroic. Gonna zone right off that Tassadar. Li Ming's gonna pick him up the second Dragonite of the game here. Lockdown is the man in that Dragonite, being the captain of the ship, if you will. And this is that mid-game Dragonite towards top that I was talking about. It was displayed heavily throughout China at the mid-season brawl. It's becoming more common around the world, especially just through any of the Eastern teams. And it's really effective to the mid-game because even though it is the least valuable lane, it suddenly makes Paradise and the Dahaka and all of that 1v1 we put so much focus to into the draft very lopsided into Tempest's favor and allows them to concentrate onto the bottom half of the map and really make up for their lack of wave clear.
Good moves there by Paradise also as the Dragonite tries to go in for the punts. But in the mid lane, now that the 10s have been picked up for a CE, they're just trying to see if they can maybe take a fight there. Up at the top, the Haka is doing a solid job against the Dragonite so far. But of course, with another 10 seconds left, it's still a bit of a damage output potential that Tempest has here. And Lockdown is using that to its fullest, nearly taking down that fort.
Just zoning here onto the bottom half of the map. Nobody's willing to take a risk too far out. And it's a moment where, again, I'm going to be critical of CE and their lack of ability to move outward with their composition. It looks like they tried for a moment here, catching H82, but it's going to be turned around quick. Sign waiting in the wake. So Shy is going to get caught out there. Nice force wall, buying a bit of time. Wins. It's taking too much damage, though, unable to survive. And the Cocoon victim is going to come out in a matter of seconds.
Distortion Beam already on the ground, so Tennis putting extra pressure on Lunara after the swap here. And talking swaps once again, the Haka taken down. The swap hits hard, and even the Aegis is not going to save Shy. Or is it trying to reposition himself once, twice? Not enough, and that's a triple kill as Tempest just dominates this game thus far. 1.5 level lead, 7 kills against 0, 8 minutes in.
Throughout all of phase number 1, oh man, Shuyu out too far, dimensional shift, I don't think it's going to matter. Good positioning to make sure that he goes through that sidewall, meaning Lockdown could not throw out the magic missiles there with the remaining mana he had. But I was going to say, in the North American scene throughout all phase 1, Artanis was a highly, highly prioritized hero, and I often was very critical on any map where he could not make the wave clear a thing. But if you hit swaps as consistently as H82, this guy's like, might be better than Stitches. It is ridiculous.
Yeah, he had a couple of fantastic swaps here already. But I have to say that CE is really just sitting there and taking the beating. There's no real fight back on there, and they're playing a double support with the Lunara, and there is really no aggression that they're showcasing. There is no pressure on the lanes. They're just basically sitting back and letting Tempest run the show. Yeah,
that's kind of a point I lightly touched up on the draft, but didn't feel enough to kind of elaborate. But what I wanted to try and convey is that even though Tempest is the 3rd seed in Korea, they do an insane amount of things very, very right. And I expect them to be dominant against a lot of teams that, as long as they are outside of the Korean region. It's just that L5 and MVP Black do such an amazing job of constantly making you question what is the right decision by keeping map pressure outward, that it makes Tempest kind of look passive. But that is very much not the case. Again, I argue that China, with their 2-1-2s and their failure to abuse their compositional advantages in the early stages of the game, is going to be brought to light throughout this tournament. And I feel like Tempest is putting up a fine case, because most people say Tempest is the one who plays passive. And look at what they're able to make happen here with almost no wave clear on their composition.
Well, right now, once again, Shy in trouble, but moves with a leaping strike over to the other side of the fight. Also heading straight into the unfair advantage on 13. So putting all his faith really into the double support here. Not afraid of Lockdowns laming, Stomble connecting on high with his Uther, and Shy tries to push the damage in. But of course, once again, the rest of the team is moving straight into the fight. Distortion Beam already used by H82.
There's going to be the Aegis, keeping Murden alive a little bit longer. Swap going down for H82, but is unable to get the kill. Cocoon is used. Lunara there with the Shy. Getting the slow onto Hankona. The disengage out. Hyde throws out the Golden Frisbee, and for now it is just all teams trading cooldowns. Nobody going down, but this is CE at the disadvantage. The swap doesn't connect, so it's still a little bit longer, but they need to make something happen.
Also keep the stacks on Greymane in mind. He already has a huge power level here, and with Uther always being able to provide him with a Divine Shield, he could go really deep in these battles. But once again, the fight starting. The Haka trying to pick some extra experience up to the top lane, trying to close that gap between the two teams, and Shy gets swapped once again by H82. A beautiful swap leading to the death of the hyper carry.
Zuyu is able to make it out with another dimensional shift. Wins on the wrong side of the wall, but he's got Dwarf Toss. He uses it and makes it over. So Tempest now closing in onto the 16 talents here. Positionally, they are able to pick up that bottom shrine. Divine Shield force, swap landing, and now Wins find himself away, but he still has the Dwarf Toss. Not the best target there, but this is going to be a Dragonite. With the 16 talents here, double shrine, Tempest 3 in a row, 8-0 in kills here.
And also they have the 16 talent in just a second. But those swaps that we've once again seen by Artanis are just insane. The one against Murden now was absolutely fantastic. But this is also the end of Artanis. So finally, CE gets a kill. They lose the Dragonite, but at least they're able to take one of the opponent's heroes down.
And that seems like that's not really that impactful. Finally, the first kill of the game here for CE, but it's the timing that matters. The fact that that happened during this Dragonite phase is really going to deter the members of Tempest making anything happen, which is why we see Hankono kind of wandering around, pitter-pattering, questioning, like, he's just waiting for his Artanis. He needs them before they can make stuff happen, and CE's now got a huge window to get that 16.
One of the things that I'm personally a bit afraid of is that Li Ming is now going to be able to just pressure Lunara way too hard. With Mirror Ball picked up as the level 16 talent, Lunara without the greater spell shield, even with the double support, is going to have a rough time here. Since Tacita is just not always going to look out for her, especially with the pressure that Tempest has put onto Muradin throughout the entire game, I feel this opens up a lot of potential plays for Lockdown to put Lunara down.
Yeah, it's a, it's an interesting trade-off there for Shai, because even if he goes into the greater spell shield, at the rate at which H82 is getting a swap onto him, it is going to be a hard time. I think it's going to be very important for the rest of this game, Shai to never use his leaping strike back-to-back. He needs to make sure he staggers use number 1 and use number 2, because that is what, at least into the last fight, and I expect continuing through this game, H82 is going to use as the indicator to make sure he can kill them. If Lunara only uses one of the leaping strikes and finds herself not on the opposite side of the table, possibly maybe opening with a flank, then H82's swap is no longer as big of lethal because it can be used as an escape tool. And that's kind of that trade-off we were talking about in draft between the modern-day Vala versus Lunara argument.
Yeah, exactly. The mobility here, once again. But I'm really curious to see how Tacita is going to play this in the fight, because now that we have Titan Killer also on the side of Artanis and the pressure against the front line, against the tank, Muradin is going to need help, and the entire build is already fully focused on survivability, even with the level 16 talent here going also into the Ironforge momentum on 7 over the potential extra damage. So Tacita is going to have a rough time keeping everyone shielded up in this game.
Really great attempt at a force there, at least drawing out the cocoon from the members of Tempest. Even though Sign, I feel like he had to have used his burrow charge if he was willing to use that heroic there. H82 caught out, Stormbolt lands, Paradise, there's going to be the drag.
Nice. And this could be the kill right here. Already Artanis in trouble, gets the Divine Shield. Well played as Hyde moves in. But this fight isn't over just yet. Once again, drag after Stormbolt. They're trying to take him. And the swap is missing as we see immediately the egg is being used. Shai barely getting out. Artanis is dead, but so is Lunara. And that provides Lockdown with another reset.
That was Hankono with those Wizen Duelist stacks. Zuyu getting caught out, Sign with that hard CC back-to-back. That was ridiculous. He just ate that Lunara up. That was really well done. And now we find Tempest able to turn it out, find themselves with another advantage. And it's worst case for CE, considering the timing of the 4th Dragonite.
And just imagine, or just think about how this fight actually started. They caught Artanis in the rotation to the bot lane as he was trying to help the remaining 4 team members out, and they could basically body him completely. Divine Shield had to be used, he was nearly dead already, and Tempest still turns the fight around and makes it into a 2-for-1 trade. Especially with Greymane just getting stack after stack on the Wizen Duelist. There's so much kill pressure now against Lunara in the back that even when she's able to escape, there's always Lockdown to consider with a quick disintegrate, a quick missile volley. He can always deliver that final blow.
I feel like this game is such a perfect example of what we see often internationally. Hold on a minute here. Is CE actually going to get this contesting for this long? Because Tempest closing in onto the 20 mark, it is a weird window with how many structures are available that it might be best that CE forfeit the Dragonite earlier, have the opportunity to take a fight pre-20, and then maybe look and know that the Dragonite's going to have that much damage. Paradise caught out though, Benediction double stun, and they got another kill. Things are falling apart here now for CE.
Yeah, the only thing that CE was trying to do in the meantime was at least get some pressure onto the bot lane to grab some of the experience in structures, but they couldn't even take the fort down. They haven't taken a single fort in this game, and Tempest is forcing again with level 20 straight against Tacita, and that's the kill right there. Once again, Artanis dropping the ult 2, and the wind is running low. Hankono should be able to take this. Everybody's chasing in. We have, of course, the 16 activated, but the swap is there again. Here comes the Titan Killer as we have H82 committing to Muradin, and Wind is going to fall eventually.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. But in the meanwhile, Alufo up on the top half of the map was able to get that top shrine, so no DK picked up yet for Tempest, but it's just ring around the rosy. It's inevitable. If anything, this is now staggered death after staggered death here for CE. And this is the prime example of why I was suggesting giving it up. Not only because they don't have to have this panicked window, but they had an opportunity where a free Dragon Knight goes over. They can take the fight before the 20 spike happens. And even if it doesn't happen right away, they can wait it out, get themselves their 20, and then fight maybe maximum down a keep. Now, it's potential for a double keep play, possibly from Tempest, and it's just a huge power spike. 20, 43 seconds before Ariel's back online. Might be GG.
Yes, he is still an entire level away from level 20 tolerance, and losing Oriel here, of course, hurts. Caught off by the cocoon, and then just simply waiting for Hyde to make it in, get the stuns in, and then the drop. Tempest has a huge opportunity here, and you can already tell that CE was trying to at least get some experience that they might hit 20 during this fight, but as you said, this could potentially be a core play now. We're 17, 18 minutes into the game, and Tempest in full forces moving through that bot lane.
Yeah, and they've got that mirror ball lean being mixed with Honkono's Wizened Duelist Greymane. The siege is absolutely real. That's why Artanis was the member who did get into the Dragon Knight. But the keep is the focus, and it's going to go down. Paradise with another drag, but it's only stalling the inevitable. Tempest wants to end this game. Honkono getting pressured from Shy, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be enough. D-shield used.
CE needs to drop the Dragon Knight. They need to drop it fast, and extra damage against the structures here. They do way too much work, down to 50 already, and they are going in for their kill. Tacet blown to pieces by Tempest as they claim game number 1, the Korean team with a lead.
This is something that I hope we don't continue to see through the rest of this tournament, that the Chinese teams pick such a macro-focused composition and kind of just don't do much with it, that they hope that their opponents make a mistake. It is a theme that we've seen throughout all of their regionals, and I'm very concerned as, is it going to develop, or at least how long does it last through this tournament? Because it might be the beginning of the end for them if it continues. I mean, it really could be their huge downfall as a region.
I mean, they are in a really rough spot here, of course. They still have to play with a player that was not part of the original lineup, so this is a massive problem that they have to work around, and I expect that if they can make it into the next rounds, if they're not getting eliminated, then they are in a position where they might get that synergy that they really need. But you're absolutely right. The passivity that we saw from them in the early game with a double support composition definitely hurt them, and it allowed Tempest to completely gain momentum here.
Now, with all that being said, I don't know if you guys were expecting this, but I'm ready to talk Artanis in that matchup, okay? H82 showing up, man. First off, one of the issues I have with Artanis is that you try to go for those God swaps all the time, and it winds up making you a dead hero.
He uses his before it hits the God swap so he can always kill the target.
Exactly. He went in for the fights that were effective. One of the things about Lunara is that she has what I call a TTE, time to be effective. She needs to get into a spot where she's able to spread out her poison, get help built out for Ariel, and force a fight. Artanis, when you actually hit your swaps, does not allow for any of that to happen, and it happened multiple times. They got into a spot where they would pull in, of course Lunara focus her down, and here's the issue. If Ariel comes in with an Aegis to try and save said Lunara, the entire team from Tempest was able to come around and group up around that target, which makes it hard for her to leaping strike away from the fight. You're locked down, and you go in for the kills. The best part, too, is Artanis scales up into, of course, Triple Strike and Titan Killer, which makes, as you guys mentioned in the cast, a very hard time for Muradin to even be effective as a tanker. He's meant to be a sponge in that composition, so Lunara can be a TTE, but none of that was allowed because Artanis is the best hero in the world.
All right, so we can take away that last sentence, but everything else he said was absolutely true.
It was awesome. I'm actually very excited to watch 82. I was very concerned, because if you miss those swaps, Muradin goes for the engage, Stormbolt. He could even go into Skullcracker, lock you down, and Lunara's like chunking you constantly.
I wasn't saying it lightly when I said at the beginning of the game. I wanted to say it before we saw him play it. Like, I am pretty confident this dude is just the best Artanis in the world. Like, maybe we're yet to see Rich step it up in that department and be the Artanis he was always meant to be, but for now, H82 has that trophy, at least for my department.
Do you think it's also a matter of them just being in a spot where they are saying, hey, we haven't really played against this as much as we mostly should, so we don't have to practice and position ourselves properly?
I mean, maybe when it comes to the swaps specifically, but when it comes to the composition that they had on the side of CE and understanding how to play it, I mean, again, I brought it up before we saw it displayed because it has been such a repeated pattern here from not only the team but the region overall. So maybe for the couple of swaps, but I don't think that was the reasoning for the outcome because of the surprise factor of H82.
For me, really, it was a passivity of CE because if you talk about Greymane and Liming, it's a combo that we see throughout the world. You try to get the resets with Greymane. He's the one who goes in for the kill. Li Ming gets the reset and just continues to barrel away with their shots. But normally we see the cocktail build with this. This time we actually saw them with a Wizened Duelist. So if you lose heroes early on, you just empower the entire combo. And at some point you have to shut down Greymane. And once you do that, you take a huge chunk out of the potential of the build. But that never happened. So Greymane always was there, could either deliver the kill or even just go in for Lunara and prepare Lunara for lockdown, who said, there's a Li Ming that's, sorry, the Lunara that's nearly dead. Who do I kill her with? Do I use the Mirror Ball, do I go for an AWP, or do I actually sacrifice my Disintegrate here? So you could really pick and choose at that point.
Yeah, that was one of the major issues. When you're facing off against Artanis, he's very similar to Stitches. He doesn't like when engages are forced upon him, and that never happened there from the composition that showed up there for CE. Now, obviously it is a double support Lunara. You can't just straight up walk into a fight and force it to happen, but they had a Muradin. They could have gotten engages and got those kills that you were mentioning, which are pivotal to break them down.
Well,